Now, the US President Joe Biden says an agreement for a temporary ceasefire in Gaza could be reached by Monday. And as part of it, he says Israel is ready to halt military activities during the Muslim holy month of Ramadan, which also begins in the coming days. Al Jazeera sources say that the initial framework for the deal includes the exchange of 400 Palestinian prisoners for 40 Israeli captives held in Gaza. Israel has also reportedly agreed to the gradual return of displaced Palestinians to northern Gaza. Sources say under the deal, Israel would reposition its forces away from crowded areas and halt aerial surveillance for 8 hours a day. Now, Biden made his remarks during an appearance on a late-night chat show.
And then we've got at least a principle agreement. There will be a ceasefire while that takes place. Ramadan's coming up, and there's been an agreement by the Israelis that they would not engage in activities during Ramadan as well, in order to give us time to get all the hostages out. That gives us time to begin to move in directions that a lot of Arab countries are prepared to move in. And in the meantime, there are too many innocent people that are being killed. And Israel has slowed down the attacks in Rafah. They have to, and they've made a commitment to me, they're going to see to it that there's ability to evacuate significant portions of Rafah before they go and take out the remainder of Hamas. But it's a process. Israel has had the overwhelming support of the vast majority of nations. If it keeps this up without this incredibly conservative government they have, and Ben-Gvir and others, I've known every major foreign policy leader in Israel since Golda Meir, they're going to lose support from around the world. And that is not in Israel's interest.
Mike Hanna joins us now from Washington, D.C. It does beg the question, Mike, what does Biden know that we don't? Seems to be sort of order of the day when it comes to any potential ceasefire.
Indeed, yes. But there, in that statement that Biden made on the late night show, he's talking about an immediate agreement, a midterm agreement, and a long-term agreement. He got a lot in that particular appearance on the late night show. He's talking about the indication of a ceasefire beginning in coming days, saying that this has been agreed to in principle. Obviously, President Biden must be aware of something that the wider public is not, the discussions that have been going on between all the interested parties. But then he continues and says that Israel has committed as well to end activities during the holy month of Ramadan. Now, that begins around March the 10th. Biden saying that this would give people time to get the captives being held in Gaza out of that country. And then he goes even further and he says, this interim and extended ceasefire would then give us time to alter the dynamic. And what he's hinting at here is a wider Arab recognition of Israel in exchange for a ceasefire or long-term agreement between Israel and Palestinians. So there's a lot packed into these comments that he made in the late night show. And clearly he's got access to information as President of the United States that the general public doesn't. But in brief, it would appear, well, President Biden says that there is an agreement in principle to get a ceasefire in place in coming days.
Mike, thanks very much for the update. Mike Hanna there for us in Washington, D.C. Well, Willem Marx joins us now from occupied East Jerusalem, and one wonders what Israel is either thinking or saying about Biden's comments. Willem.
Well, the Israeli government is not saying a huge amount. We've reached out to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's office. They have said they are not offering comment on the remarks from the US leader. We've also reached out to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs here, that's often involved in these kinds of negotiations and obviously often responds to what foreign governments say about Israel. They too have not responded to our requests. In terms of the other parties to this negotiation, of course, we've been hearing from the Qatari Foreign Ministry over the last couple of hours. Hamas, we've been trying to reach out to some of the people close to that organization. We've not been hearing back from them yet. They have spoken to Reuters over the course of the last few hours, in which they've said, and this is according to the Reuters news agency, these are unnamed officials inside Hamas, saying that Biden's remarks suggesting the agreement had already been reached in principle were premature. There were still big gaps that needed to be bridged. Clearly, there is a concern that the details of this deal that have been put out there into the public are not entirely agreed on between the two sides. That may be quite obvious thing to say, The central contradiction, of course, is going to be around resolving the long-term plan for the Israeli military inside Gaza. The Israelis have said repeatedly, as has Prime Minister Netanyahu on television, that he will push ahead with operations in Rafah, whether there is a ceasefire or not. Hamas has publicly talked about the need for a permanent ceasefire. Trying to bridge that gap seems to be one of the challenges.
And of course, Willem, just to clarify for our viewers, where does Israel stand on any conversation that involves the word pause or ceasefire?
It's a really good question, and I think a lot of governments have tied themselves in knots trying to figure out the differential here. Netanyahu, let's just take him at his word as the Prime Minister, he has said that whatever happens, the Israelis will push on through. Speaking to CBS Face the Nation over the course of the weekend, whether there is a ceasefire or not over the next, I should say, 6 weeks or so, let's just say there's going to be 40 days of ceasefire in return for 40 Israeli captives being released. During those 40 days, there would be a cessation of hostilities, there would be a reduction in, let's say, aerial reconnaissance. But after that, Netanyahu's made it very clear that he wants to see what he's called absolute victory. So the idea that this is going to become a permanent ceasefire doesn't seem to be something that Israeli officials publicly are acknowledging as a possibility.
Willem Marx there for us in occupied East Jerusalem. Thank you.